Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode. In this session we're going to be talking about the rights and responsibilities of parents, but also from a woman's perspective, the heightened respect that mothers have. So the real role and the place that Islam places on mothers in particular. So I think we always need to remind ourselves, and as women I suppose we are the mothers, and this role is given so much place and respect in Islam. There's so many beautiful narrations that I think sometimes when we're caught up in our busy lives being mothers and doing all of the things that entails, then sometimes we can maybe forget that the respect and honour that's placed on women that are mothers. And it's such an important role, but it has so much reward and so much blessing as well. And we can remind ourselves, a man came to the Prophet and asked the Prophet, who is the most deserving and worthy of my good company? And the Prophet replied, your mother. And then the man replied, and then who's the next after that? And the Prophet, peace be upon him, then replied again, your mother. And then a third time, your mother. And I think this is just one way, and this is always used, and rightly so, to underline the real importance. And then he said your father. So I think it's really always used to underline the importance that we should place on our mothers. But also as mothers, we need to be remembering the important role that God has given us in our lives and on earth. And then there's another example of a man who came to the Prophet and asked the Prophet, I want to go to jihad in the way of Allah. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, asked him, is your mother alive? And when the man said yes, the Prophet beautifully said, then stay with her, for Jannah is under her feet. And that's just such a beautiful sort of way of expressing how important a mother is. And I think a really nice description to imagine that the paradise, the Jannah, is at the feet of your mother. And that really emphasizes the importance and the role that mothers have in the world. And I think it's something that we as mothers need to remind ourselves of. There's so much emphasis placed on this, and I think sometimes our life is so overtaken being mothers as people who are busy, we have so much to do, and looking after the children, looking after the home can be really difficult. And I think sometimes, certainly for me, I can remember when I was breastfeeding, probably my second or third child, and I remember consciously reminding myself as I sat there, night after night, having not had any sleep, and sometimes in pain and struggling, and really actually consciously reminding myself that what I was doing was going to get me, inshallah, so much reward for nursing the baby and just for staying awake at night. And I can consciously remember reminding myself of that so that I could get through it. Because I think sometimes we can, especially when we're not mothers yet, actually look at mothers and think that it's easy and somehow that it's a job that just comes naturally. And actually sometimes it doesn't come naturally. Sometimes people have a baby and they really struggle afterwards. Sometimes they get down and depressed, and sometimes these things are not given that much importance. And I think we need to always be conscious of the fact that we're not all going to be perfect all of the time. And I think the reason that so much reward, so much blessing is placed on the mother and the role of the mother is because it is so difficult and such a struggle. And when we read the descriptions of in the Quran of how it talks in Surah 31 about we have enjoined on man to be dutiful and good to his parents, and reminds us his mother bore him in weakness and hardship upon weakness and hardship, the duration of carrying him in the womb and weaning him for 2 years. So it's actually mentioned in the Quran in such a beautiful way and very, very well summarized, but really reminds us how amazing this role is. And I think, if we're saying that the Jannah is right there at the feet of the mother, it's there for us to remind ourselves as mothers, but also to remember that to our own mothers and to our own parents. And I think, again, to always be remembering that things won't go how you think they will necessarily, and that this role of mother, given such importance and such greatness, but actually is sometimes really hard as well. And I think there's a lot of expectation we put on ourselves. And I think as women, generally we would probably be more likely to be hard on ourselves than maybe men are, especially in relation to children and family. And we're always thinking about whether we're doing a good job or not, and have we done enough of this or done too much of that. And it's a good thing. It's always good to be re-looking and reminding ourselves, but let's not be too harsh on ourselves either, and give ourselves a break and remember that actually it's a hard job. Sometimes we'll go better than others. And, you know, I suppose the other aspect to this is to also be reminding our own children that they actually have to respect us as parents as well. And what does that mean? And really they have rights from us. So we can't just expect them to be good to us if we're not being good to them. You know, again, they're a gift from God for us, and we have been given this responsibility to look after them, to nurture them, to teach them in the best way that we can. And we hope and pray then that they will then in turn be respectful and kind and good to us. And I think that relationship there is really important. And one aspect certainly for me that's relevant is my relationship with my parents, who my parents aren't Muslim. And so for me, it's been really important to be reminded. And there's certainly stories of the Prophet, peace be upon him, when one example where a person came to the Prophet and actually asked, because her mother wasn't Muslim, and how should she relate to that? And the Prophet, you know, beautifully said, yes, indeed, stay connected to your mother. And this kind of connection for somebody like me whose parents are not Muslim is a really good reminder that actually they're still my parents, and of course they have the rights as well, and I have to be mindful of their needs and trying to look after them, and actually for them, in my case, helping them to understand what my faith means and what's important to me and how that relates, you know, me to them. But actually I have a responsibility to them whether they're Muslim or not, and in my case they're not Muslim. And then obviously I have my responsibility to my mother-in-law. So I have another parent that I need to think about, and how do I develop that relationship with her. And sometimes a relationship between daughter-in-law and mother-in-law can be quite difficult. And it's a really important relationship, because it's very important that you don't put your husband in between yourself and your mother, his mother. That's a very difficult decision that a man has to make, because he has a responsibility and duty towards his own mother and a love for her, and of course he's developing a love and a relationship and rights and responsibilities to his wife. To put him in the middle of that can actually be something that I think can cause unnecessary problems within a home, within a marriage. So I think that's another aspect of a marriage and a married life that we need to be very, very careful of. So I think just in general, in terms of talking about the role and responsibility and the rights of parents, again, there's lots of examples where the Prophet himself, peace be upon him, spoke a lot about the role that parents have, and both parents are to be listened to be respected, to be obeyed, if you like, to really be people that you have to take lesson from and you have to learn from. And let's be honest, you know, sometimes as parents get older, they can be very, very challenging. You know, it's often talked about how much more challenging it is to deal with an older person than it is to deal with children. Children are cute, children do lovely things, and they naturally melt the heart. And sometimes parents, as they get older, our own parents, can sometimes be challenging. And we have to really be able to develop patience and love and respect for parents, and listen to them and meet their needs, even if we find it difficult, even if we are being challenged by it. We need to remember that the Prophet himself, peace be upon him, was so clear about the relationship that people have to have with their parents. And we're taught throughout the Quran, it's reminded over and over again how much respect parents have. Now, sometimes parents may want you to do something that actually goes against the faith. And this is the only time really when you have to then stop and think about what they're asking you to do. And if they're asking you to do something that goes against your faith, then that's a different matter and you need to discuss it further. And an example of this would be if parents are, for example, forcing their son or daughter to marry somebody against their will. In this particular case, we would say that Islam actually teaches the opposite. Islam teaches that nobody needs to be forced to marry somebody they're not happy with. And if parents are forcing their children to do that, then that actually goes against the teachings of Islam. And a child then really does need to consider making their own decisions and not necessarily automatically following what their parents are saying just because their parents are saying it to them. And this is a crucial issue, and we see this in the UK currently, where parents are in fact forcing perhaps sometimes their daughters or sons into a situation that isn't what they feel happy with, and we need to be able to teach young people and parents to say, actually, while you have to have utmost respect for your parents, parents cannot take advantage of that and then use that for their own advantage and make the person do something that they're not happy to do. So I think as adults, we need to be teaching our children that they need to have respect for their parents, to have respect for all people around them. But this relationship between son and daughter and parent is absolutely is an absolutely crucial one. And we really need to understand the, if you like, the reverence that parents are given. And why is that? You know, there's so many reasons and things that we can think about, but the effort and the amount of time and love and unconditional love that parents have for their children is something that I think none of us really fully appreciate until we are maybe parents ourselves. And one of the things that I have really realized recently is that my own mother, in her own very quiet, nice way, has always, and she's not Muslim, but some of her, the way she has acted and dealt with things is very much in line with what we would understand from Islamic teachings as a parent. She has always encouraged and supported whatever we've done. And even when those decisions have not necessarily been the right decisions, she has respected the decisions we've made, especially in our adult lives. I, for example, becoming Muslim, my mother and the rest of my family have always been very, very supportive, and it's something that I sometimes feel I take for granted, and other people don't have this, the luxury that I have of the support and love from all of my family, even when I made a decision that they maybe didn't agree with, but they still supported and respected it. And I have really come to realize that as I've got older, that that's something that has really helped me. So I have a lot of love and respect for my parents and the rest of my family for this issue, because they have made it actually very easy for me to practice my faith, to learn, to develop, to grow, to bring my children up as Muslims, but to still feel part of that family, wider family unit. And it's something that I hold very dear. And I think they have respected the way we have approached family life and the way that we are approaching our relationship with our parents. And I think it's something they really have seen as something that's very, very valuable. So I certainly hold that as a very important part of my life and my understanding of the way that Islam deals with this issue of parents to children. And there's another really famous saying here which talks about how we're all shepherds, and we're all shepherds of others. So, you know, the man is the shepherd of his family, and the mother is the shepherd of her children, and then the leader is the shepherd of the people that follow. And I think it's such a lovely analogy of how it's about looking after and nurturing, but having respect for others, and how you need to take them with you on the journey. And this kind of understanding of, you know, very much about how the relationships between people and that relationship between parents and children, even as the children get older and as the parents get older and into elderly life, and how we need to maintain that respect. And Islam teaches that seeking the pleasure of your parents, being good to them and kind to them, you know, gets so much reward. And actually, I think encourages that atmosphere of love and respect that you need throughout the whole family, the wider family is a very, very important part of Islamic life. And I think the other aspect is this part that often we find ourselves in, where we're maybe not speaking to or not in contact with people within our family. And it happens easily. You know, sometimes there's a saying that says that you don't choose your family. And it may be that you have people within your family, maybe even your parents or other people in the wider family that you perhaps don't feel naturally respectful towards, or maybe there's a part of their personality that you find very difficult. And certainly if it is your parents, then that is a challenge for you. That will become really a jihad for you. That will become something that you have to overcome, and it will be something that needs to work, and you need to really think about your own personality and why it is that you can't relate to your parents, and why it is that you find it difficult to do things for them. You really have to work on it. It's such an important aspect of our faith that you have to have respect and love and kindness towards your parents, and always be looking to do things for them. Always be looking to do what you can. But as I say, not just for your own parents, but for your in-laws as well, your mother-in-law and your father-in-law. Really try and think about them as your parents as well. And how can you please them? How can you help them? How can you do things for them? And constantly be looking. We're all busy. Life is busy, and it's difficult sometimes to think, how can we fit all of this in as well? But actually have so much love and respect for your parents. If, as a woman, you treat your mother-in-law and your father-in-law like your own parents, then imagine what impact that has on your husband and how he then feels. And do it in a genuine way. And if there's something about your mother-in-law that you don't like, keep it to yourself. You don't have to tell your husband every aspect of what you think about your mother-in-law. If you don't like her, why this and why that, and actually put that barrier between them, because that will never develop a good relationship with the husband. It's very, very tempting to do, and I've seen it many, many times. I have people who come to me and constantly talking about how bad their mother-in-law is, or what she's done, or what mistakes she's made. And this is just something that just doesn't sit comfortably with us and doesn't fit with the teachings that we see. She becomes like your mother as well, and you have to treat her with respect and love in the way that you do with your own mother. And that developing that relationship with your in-laws, with your mother-in-law, your father-in-law, is a crucial part of developing a good family unit. It's really important when you have young children that they see the respect that you hold for your own parents and your in-laws, and how they can then become and develop that in their own lives. And so when they become older and then inshallah get married and they have their own in-laws, and also their relationship with you, that will reflect on how you've taught them and how they've seen you behave. And you can't expect for children who then become adults to automatically be looking good and being good to their parents if they haven't necessarily seen you doing that with yours. And you know, I know that sometimes it can be a struggle. Sometimes older people can become quite difficult to manage and quite difficult to develop a relationship with, and especially if they become ill or if maybe their memory starts to go. These are challenging times, but that's why so much emphasis and actually so much reward is offered and is promised for people who are good and respectful and loving and kind to parents, when actually sometimes it might be quite hard. It might be quite a challenge. It's not going to always be easy. Sometimes they will seem very, very demanding, and we still have to give them what they are due. And I think that's why I am so thankful that I have this framework and these teachings that can help me to remember just how important that is. I'm not sure if I would have necessarily conducted myself in that way if I didn't have this framework and these teachings to help me to do that. And it's not to say that I'm always perfect. I know that sometimes I don't do enough for whether it be my parents or my mother-in-law or the rest of the family, but I have to constantly be remembering why it's so important, why they need so much looking after. What did the Prophet say about this? What was the important things? Why did he talk so much about respecting and caring, and how it actually can remove other sins that we may be doing in other things? Actually, it's one of those areas where if we do good in this, it actually earns us forgiveness for other bad things that we may be doing. And again, it's challenging. So to be nice to a young baby, to be looking after them and loving them and letting your heart go out to them is easier than it is for an older person sometimes. But you know, we can learn so much from our parents and how to do in our own lives. And I know that certainly as a mother now, and as I get older, I look back and look at my own mother, and for all of the struggles and things that she's been through, she's still come through her life and is actually a very good example for me, even though I think sometimes she doesn't realise that she is. But I actually feel very lucky to have her at the centre of my life, to then look at how I can be as a mother. And I don't think, and my grandmother passed away recently, and again, she wasn't a Muslim, but she had so many values and so much to offer the world, and people didn't have anything bad to say about her, and she never said anything bad about people. And I realised, wow, that as a figure, as a role model in my life, I kind of realised it more after she had passed away than I even did when she was alive, at what she was able to offer. And I felt if I could only give some of that to the world in the way that she did, then I would have felt that I've achieved something. So always be thinking about how we can learn from older people, how they can become the role models in our life, and how we can benefit from the things that they're teaching us, and how we take that forward, and how we portray that to our own children, and allow the children to read these stories and to understand what they can learn from the Prophet's teachings, the way he was. You know, what kind of a person was he? What kind of a parent was he? When he, Zayd, when he was staying in the Prophet's house, peace be upon him, and why he didn't want to leave the Prophet's house and go back to his own father, because the Prophet was such an amazing person to be around, peace be upon him. And all of us can learn from that. You know, I sometimes ask myself, if that was me, if that was my family, and we had somebody in our family, would they want to stay with us forever, or would they be rather they left and go back to their own family? And it's something that we can take and learn and understand, why is that? And why was it that everybody, from children to older people, all wanted to be around the Prophet, peace be upon him, and how amazing he was with people. He always gave people attention, whether they were young or old, and always made time for people, always looked at people when they were talking to him. And you know, these amazing examples for all of us to really feel so touched by, and wonder how well are we doing in any of these things, and how much more work we have to do to get to the point where we can really say that we are following his example and living a life that is in the way that he did, with everyone from every age group. You know, he was the leader of all of the world really at one point, and why was it that he was still able to give time for the young child who was sitting there with his bird, and how was he able to talk to people and give them respect, and everybody loved him. And I think we really can benefit from these teachings and feel blessed that we have this to remind us of how we need to be as a person, and how we need to deal with people of all ages. So I would just conclude by saying that it's a reminder for myself and to all of us that it's not always easy being a parent ourselves, but how much respect and love we can give to others will then be what we receive back. And this happens in all of our lives, but particularly when it comes to our children. And as a mother, so much reward is on offer for mothers, and rightly so. You know, it's not easy to bear children. The pregnancy, the birth, and all of what happens after that is testing, but it's such a blessing as well. And it's such an amazing role, and so but can be so challenging. But always remember that this reward and these reminders are there for all of us to remind and consciously remind ourselves, and be the best parent we can be, so that in turn our children then turn around and be the best children they can be to their parents. And that's how the life, cycle of life will go. And we all have to, as with everything, try our best, do what we can, always be looking at how we can learn from the amazing example of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and how he was with everyone that he came across, and all of these teachings he put into practice for us to learn from and to benefit in our daily lives. So once again, I wish you well, and I hope you enjoyed these reminders, and I look forward to another session. Assalamu alaikum.